Hi, welcome to Dear Art Producer. I am your host, Heather Elder. Today is September 9th, 2021, and today we have senior art producer Nikki O'Toole with us. Nikki has been working in the art and photography industries for nearly 20 years. Through the years, in multiple cities, she's worked as a photo editor, art director, photo producer, studio manager, agent, and art producer. All of these roles have shaped her 365 view of the photography industry and aid her now as an art producer at Media Arts Lab. Welcome to the podcast, Nikki. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here.
Absolutely. I know we were emailing back and forth a bit to make it happen. So thank you.
Yeah, schedules are always fun and challenging.
Oh my gosh. And I thought it was funny when you and I logged on and we were talking, but we weren't seeing each other. In this Zoom world, it's funny to have a conversation over the phone, over the internet and the computer without actually seeing each other. So it's kind of nice, actually.
I didn't have to do my hair or makeup, which is always
exactly. I check my phone first thing in the morning. I'm like, okay, is it a day that I have to shower because I'm going to be on Zoom, or can I just go right down to my office right now?
Yes, exactly.
Well, that's great. Well, I'm really happy to have you. And I think one way to kind of get started, I love getting to know our guests and having our audiences get to know you a little bit as well. And I think one of the most interesting things about art producers, having done so many of these podcasts now, is the fact that they come from so many different backgrounds. You know, nobody raises their hands and says, I want to be an art producer when they're in college. A lot of people don't even know what it is. So I always think it's interesting to start the podcast off by finding out what your path was. How did you get to where you are?
Yeah. I don't think I'm that different from a lot of art producers, actually, in that there was just this love for photography. You know, a lot of producers I've talked to actually wanted to be photographers, and so did I. That was my initial passion and love. So I went to school for photography. Actually, photojournalism was what I was super into. And yeah, I guess once I graduated, I moved to New York and I started trying to assist and, getting my book out there and just, started realizing how competitive it is and just how talented you have to be and how much you just have to really, really want it. And I just didn't think I had what it took to, to get to that place. And I just think I realized I didn't really want it that badly. And at the time I think my roommate was an editor at a magazine and they were looking for a junior art director and were interested in, having me try out for the position. And I just kind of fell into that and really, really enjoyed it. So it was like a smaller travel magazine and I did sort of page layouts and helped think about the future issues. And it was, a little bit of production, but more just, more kind of just page design and stock images and that sort of thing. But it was kind of my intro to, that side of things. And I worked for another magazine. I moved to Chicago after that and worked for another magazine. And it was there that I met a photographer in Chicago named Alan Shortall that I worked with for about 5 years. And for him, I produced and managed his studio. And that's where I really started to understand production and, just worked with super cool, creative people and, kind of fell into that world and really enjoyed it. And, being with him for about 5 years, I sort of realized there wasn't really a lot of room for growth there. It was just, you're kind of a manager and producer of this smaller studio. And I started thinking about the bigger picture and, what I wanted to really do, what would be a good fit. And I remember at the time we would get, requests from art buyers a lot and just started thinking that sounded like a pretty cool role, one where I could use the left and right sides of my brain and, still kind of be with those creative people. And so I just started kind of looking into that and reaching out to people and, finding art buyers on LinkedIn and asking for advice and all that kind of stuff. And I had a really good friend that worked at the time, Draft FCB as an account person, and they were hiring for traffic managers. And she kind of was like, this could be your in. And we both kind of agreed to that. And I got hired at a draft FCB as a traffic manager.
Oh, that's cool. Is that where we would have met first? I feel like maybe not.
I think so, because I think that's when we did the chameleon stuff with Mark,
Oh,
right? I
yes.
think so, yeah.
Yes. Yep, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
So I was there for about 3 months, and then like amazingly, the a junior art producer left, and I asked if I could fill that role. So, I feel like for me, in most of my life, I've had a goal, and I've worked really hard to get to it. Like I've planned and researched, and kind of had to work for it. I don't really think I'm one of those people where something's just fallen into my lap. I've always kind of had to have a dream and really work hard to get
Well, and
there.
your
So,
experiences are so well-rounded. I mean, even in our intro, when we said your 365 view of the industry, like it is legit.
yeah,
You
I've
know,
tried it all.
yeah, it's pretty amazing because I've always said that, and I've always thought that some of the best art producers have worked in studios as producers and studio managers.
Mm,
And as a rep, that's where I started. Well, I started as an account person at an ad agency, so I learned a ton there. And
okay.
then I moved over to working with a photographer as her rep and producer and studio manager. It was a smaller studio, so it was easy to do all of that, but I felt like I understood so much about the industry, having worked on both sides. And then when I became a rep, I constantly, still to this day, draw on my experiences from all of those jobs. It was like a
Mhm.
little mini boot camp.
Yeah, and I just think it really helps to see that other side, and
Hmm.
what they have to do and how they have to make it work, and it really helps you to work together, much better.
Now, is there something that was kind of like you're consistently known for on your team that you saw, throughout your different positions?
Oh, I would hope that they would say I'm there to help. Whenever I see someone is overloaded or has a lot going on and I'm a little lighter, I always want to be available to help. So that would probably be number one. Number two, I just always want to keep learning more and understanding more. And so I tend to raise my hands to understand another department, or you know work on like a digital spot, or just something that would be a little different, still production, but something that would really help me to understand a little more about different areas of production.
Well, and what a great time. I feel like we are in our industry right now where we're all learning so much.
Yeah.
Obviously the pandemic took us and shook us upside down, and we had to kind of reinvent so much. But even before the pandemic came around, we were learning so much about integrating motion and stills and, what it meant to shoot for social and, lots of different things. So I think, being open to that, anybody, whoever you are in this industry, is
Mhm.
so important. But being known for that on your team, I think has, no wonder people see you as a valuable resource.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so maybe you should just tell us a little bit about your role as an art producer. And, has that changed over the last year with the pandemic? Do you see it changing as you move forward? Maybe just explain to the audience a little bit about, because for sure every art producer does something different. So what is it like for you?
Yeah, at my last job, it was definitely more traditional. A lot of photo production, illustration production, kind of being involved at that initial concepting phase and bringing artists to the table, working on the budget, the ballparks, the budgets, the estimating, seeing everything through from the production to, retouching and final assets and billing. So just kind of that traditional role. I think, towards the last few months actually have it's been a little more integrated, and I'm not sure if that's because of COVID, or if it's just budgets in general. But I feel like we're often given a budget that is meant to incorporate digital, print, photography or art, and we just kind of have to work together to figure out how to make that budget work, with all the departments together. So I think that's been happening a lot more.
It's so interesting. It has totally been happening, a lot over the years. And I remember used to be able to ask for the budget and it'd be like, yeah, well, I have this, or whatever the budget was. And now it's like, well, we
Yeah,
have this, but it's got to include digital and motion and, a bunch of different things. And no one at the onset really knows who's going to take what part of the pie.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that being the case has led to, integrating more motion with stills, at least for me, in our team or my past team. We've typically had to pick, one photographer or one director, and that person will also handle the motion component, or the director will somehow find a still shooter to handle the still part of it. And it's just caused us to combine, that asset creation under like a smaller umbrella, really, which is exciting for me because, I definitely want to be doing more motion and expanding, that content production skill set.
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes toward your learning as well, right? You are always learning and constant, like you said, you're constantly interested in figuring stuff out, and this is, such a great time for that to happen.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of photographers also shoot motion and, are excited about that challenge too. So it's been kind of fun to work together and figure out solutions to it, as challenging as it can also be.
Yeah, and that's kind of my next question to you. What do you think is the most challenging aspect of your job? And that might not be it, but
I think the obvious answer is budgets getting smaller and timelines shrinking.
yeah.
That's kind of continuing to happen. But I think the one of the hardest parts is getting excited about a project and getting the photographers or artists on board and figuring out the approach and going back and forth with bids, and you feel like you're excited and you're in a good place, and then for some reason the project is killed. And
Oh
whether
my
that
gosh.
be like,
I almost want you to repeat that because I feel like it happens so often,
yeah,
that I think the photographers it happens to think it's only happening to them.
yeah.
So to hear you say on your end that it's happening as well, it's a big deal. What do you think is causing that to happen?
I think it can be a couple of things. It can be the client just wants to change direction. It could be a competitor did something similar, or they just suddenly, or they get a new member on the team and that team member doesn't like it. And, it just could be a number of things and they just don't feel like it's the right fit anymore. Or, the budget they had set aside is gone, is lost, or they
Yeah.
had to put it somewhere else. I mean, I think you and I worked on something recently where this happened, and the project just kind of died. They wanted to use an older asset because they just didn't have the money anymore. So I think there's a number of reasons, but it's hard for us too, because we put a lot of, blood, sweat, and tears behind that. And we're excited with, the selected photographers that we're working with. And it's definitely challenging to have your last month or 2 months or whatever of planning just kind of die like that. And then, the hard part too is also reaching back out to those artists and kind of having to explain that. And just, it's kind of heartbreaking. It sucks.
Yeah. It is. It's really hard, especially now, right? With COVID and what everybody has endured over the years. We get all excited about a project and then having it go away is never easy and always a bummer. But,
Yeah,
we're
definitely.
always appreciative of being considered. So that's a positive.
Yeah. And, if we like you, we're going to come knocking again. So,
Exactly.
it's not over.
Exactly. And I've said this on the podcast before, but when I first started representing Hunter Freeman, he would say, if it takes you 50 phone calls to get someone to return your call or hire you or look at a portfolio or whatever it is, he's like, you better start calling. And I always say that to the photographers. I'm like, if it takes us 10 jobs, if we have to estimate 10 jobs in order to get one, like bring on the jobs. Like I'll estimate 9 so that I could, that we won't get, just so that we can get that 10th one if that's what it takes. So,
Well, that's a great attitude. And that's why you are where you are today, Heather.
well, you're sweet. Okay. So what do you love about your job?
I love, and I think a lot of us will agree that we really love finding talent, and whether it be people we already know and love, or whether it be new talent, but finding that talent cultivating it and putting it in front of our creatives and having them sometimes select someone that we really like or someone that we discovered or that I discovered, I should say. And, you know, just it feels like I'm doing this job for a reason. It feels like my opinion is valued. If it's someone new, I feel excited that they're getting a little limelight, you know, getting to work for the agency that I'm at. I just feel like that's like the pinnacle. It's just kind of, you know, finding those great talents and then them being noticed and appreciated and selected.
Yeah, I think that would feel great. I think that is your job to have your finger on the pulse of what's going on out there, and
Yeah.
then to kind of serve some options up to your creative team and have them be excited, just as excited about them and think that they're relevant, and then move the shoot forward has got to feel really rewarding.
Yeah, definitely. It is. Yeah. And like I said, on both sides, I feel great for the artist and it's a great feeling, obviously, myself as well.
Well, let's talk a little bit about production. What are your clients asking of you right now? And are meaning like, are some of them hesitant to produce, or are they wanting to produce, but they're asking for too much, thinking because they haven't had enough, they haven't produced enough in the past recently. Like what is it that they need from you?
Yeah, I definitely think the asks are getting bigger and, you know, the budgets are still kind of small and not big enough for those asks. So that tends to be the challenge every time, really, is how do we make their requests work with the budget that we're given. You know, a lot of times it's cutting some of it or minimizing a shot list or having a shoot be a little more run and gun style versus a beauty shot list. So just it's definitely a lot of problem solving on figuring out how to give them what they want with a budget that isn't really worthy of their request.
Yeah.
A lot of times they do have to
That's
face
so kind.
reality.
You put that so kindly.
Yeah, and I think they also have to clients that is have to kind of respect you enough to say this really isn't something that we can do, but here's what we can do, or here's a shift, and here's how we can still get you something for what you have. So I think during COVID that it's kind of weird because I feel like I've seen that more, but they do also understand, COVID protocol and that has to be a part of a budget now too. And that can be, 5 to 10 grand, depending on what kind of production you're talking about. So I do feel like they're willing to pay that because, they know that's part of it and they want these great assets. But, I think they still don't often fully understand what is needed in the rest of a production to make it work.
Yeah, it is hard. I think the whole budget thing is such an interesting conversation because so many times, obviously, we ask not because we want to take your money and spend it all, but I think for two big reasons. One, to make sure we're not wasting anybody's time. Like
Mm-hmm.
if, and I want to make sure, especially if you're a new client, that you and I are on the same page when we say, when we talk about the budget, because sometimes people will say to me, oh, you know, I think we have plenty, we're good. Like just estimate it the way it is. And then I send them a bid for, $120,000 and they're like, oh God, I only had $20,000. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay. Everybody spent all this time. 20,000 isn't nearly enough. Right. So asking that budget question means knowing that we're on the same page in terms of like, oh, okay. You want, you need the kind of production that I can give you. But I think the other reason is we want to get you the most for the amount of money that you have. So I do want to spend the full amount of your money if I can, because I'm going to get you the best crew and the most amount of props and the most options and the fullest schedule that I can give you for the most with the biggest yield of content that I can get you. It's pretty unusual when clients have more money than we need. So it's pretty rare
Yeah.
if someone gives me a budget and, we have plenty. There are definitely times where I'm like, yeah, we're coming in $10,000 under, but it is kind of rare. And I think that has to do with what you're saying. The
Mhm.
budgets have shrunk and the asks have increased.
Mhm. Yeah, I think, when I can, I always try to give a range. Just I don't want to waste anyone's time either, of course. I try to give a range. If it's a low budget, I often just come right out with it and say, here's what we have. Can you make it work or not?
Yeah. And I do think you've worked at agencies where the clients that you have, by the mere fact that they're hiring an agency and you are coming, we have a relationship and you're coming to me, the type of photographers I have. That first part of my answer was more for the clients that I've never worked with before, or at client direct,
Mm.
or, are at startup agencies. And, they think, $20,000 is enough for a 3-day shoot and 10 talent.
Wait, it's not?
No, it's not with the photographers that we represent, but for some people that works for
Yeah.
sure. Some people
Yeah,
that
yeah, I
definitely works.
understand.
So, okay, so what does your next month look like? I know in terms of production, and like things that you're estimating and such.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of an unknown right now, because I'm, just about to get started at Media Arts Lab. So that's still kind of hard to say. I can say, a few weeks ago when I was still at my earlier agency at David and Goliath, actually, I was working on, and it would have been coming up this month, an integrated project with a broadcast producer who was putting a digital video together. And it was one of those instances where we were trying to make a small budget work. They wanted a video and stills. And, it was just a lot of us putting our heads together and figuring out what can we do to bring this down, and how can we get this one photographer we were looking at to do it all. So, definitely falling more along those lines of what we were discussing earlier, just kind of combining those departments and combining productions.
And do you ever work with production consultants?
Yeah, well, we did. I did on Kia for sure, and I worked a little bit on Frito Lay, and they had one as well.
Any tips for, listeners who are kind of new to what that role is and kind of how to best work with a production consultant?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately the best thing to do is look at them as a team member, really, instead of someone that you're bumping heads with. It's really, you're really out for the same goal, and you have the same mission, and that's to save the client money. That's to get the best value, out of your production. So, I think the best thing is to work with them, not against them. And I often, when I'm sharing an estimate with a consultant, I often point out things I notice, and I think they appreciate that, and then they'll take a look at that and they'll add a few more things they notice. And it's really teamwork. It doesn't have to be a negative conversation.
I agree. And, it's so interesting over the course of my career, when cost or production consultants first kind of came on the scene and they were called cost consultants, it was definitely adversarial in the beginning because we never had access to them. We would have really strict rules, and it was harder
Mhm.
to kind of negotiate and state our case. But, as the years passed and they became production consultants now, and more of them are working with the agencies and the clients directly,
Mhm.
I find them really to be a very positive role. And, some of them I'm getting to know because they were former art producers and now they've become the consultants.
Right.
And I think they bring a lot of value to the process. And I think your advice is right on. If you've never worked with one before, or you have one on a project, having a
Mhm.
very open mind to them and what they're bringing to the process, even if the questions, are not questions that things that you can't change. I think, just knowing that they're there in a positive way is really important.
Yeah, exactly. I think they're there to help. And I think, I look at them as a helper, really. And, a good cost consultant, especially one that's been a producer, understands when something shouldn't be reduced. And, if, you and I were working together and we come back and say, this is why this is what it is, a good cost consultant will say, okay, I understand. And they're not going to keep pushing. So, yeah, I think it can be a really beneficial relationship.
The Artist Management Association is going to do a webinar with three or production consultants in October. I think it'll be really fascinating to hear they're from three different companies, and we'll be talking about just that. So it'll be really exciting
Oh yeah, I'd love to hear that.
and insightful. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the selection process. So, you have your three photographers or directors, and everybody's kind of presented their estimates, and you often probably request treatments. Is that accurate? Do you still request them? Have you used them a lot, or do you require them a lot?
I think, I think first of all, it all depends, which it usually does. You know, a treatment can definitely be helpful, especially if it's someone we haven't worked with before, because we do
Hmm.
want to see how they would approach a project. I think it's most helpful when, a client or the agency is trying something new, or it's something that's a little, I don't know, a little different for the client, what they've been doing in the past, or it's the case of having someone do stills and motion. It's super helpful to have a treatment, and we probably would request a treatment. I think if it's someone we've worked with before and it's kind of the same sort of projects that we've been doing, I don't really think it's necessary. I think an artist's, portfolio should really speak for itself. Unless it's like I said, unless it's something that's a little outside of the usual or there's added components to it and it really does matter on how that would be approached.
So, do you have any advice for photographers who really stress out over these treatments? Sometimes I mean, not sometimes, most times they involve so much work. It takes a lot of time for them to create and share their ideas. And, I had a photographer once tell me, like, by the time I do the treatment, if I don't get the job, it's more of a bummer because I feel like I've already produced it. I've already created it in my mind. And we're all trying to look for ways to kind of cut back a little bit and not make them so intense. Maybe you can share with us what are the most important elements in a treatment that you need, and how could someone be more efficient in sharing that vision with you?
First of all, I don't think a treatment needs to really be done until we're down to the final couple, right, of photographers or artists. I don't think it's necessary up until that point because it's just an aesthetic that we're looking for. So I would definitely hold out until you're one of the finalists. And like I said, unless it's something that we're asking for your unique approach on. For instance, how would you do all of these stills and a drone shot and this little video component, and how do you see that working? you know we would definitely want to understand your approach and your treatment there. I also think when it's an aesthetic that we have not done before for a particular client, if it's something that we're pushing them a little to take a risk, I think that's when a treatment and your unique take on it is important, especially for the client to understand. I think if it's something that's right up your alley, that's you're kind of known for, that your book speaks to, I don't think it has to be a super intensive treatment. I think it can be visuals that fit the project well, that you think really speak to the project, or newer approaches you're taking that you think could fit well to the project, and just little write-ups. I don't even know if you really need much of that. I just think it's just all about the visual, unless we really need to understand your unique approach to
Mhm.
a more complicated project. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it absolutely makes sense. And I think it's good advice. And it's a good way to kind of frame the thought process. I have a few photographers that have been pushing back a little bit when what's being asked of them is very much apparent on their website. Like their
Mhm.
website speaks for itself, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And there's not anything hugely unique or different about the shoot. They're writing up a little blurb in an email and sending along a link to their website, because
Right.
they've, especially some of them, have worked really hard to update their websites in a way to make the presentation more treatment like.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, to be perfectly honest with you, at my previous agency, I wasn't getting requests for a lot of treatments, and I don't think a lot of treatments were reviewed. I think they just want the visuals. They want to see that it's a fit, unless there's a specific ask and they really do want to understand how it would be approached.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, okay, so when it's time to choose the photographer, right? The client has seen the treatment, maybe they've got the estimates, they've had the presentation from you guys. Overall, just in the industry in general, you don't have to pull from anywhere that you've worked or not, because I think it's kind of an industry question. Do you think clients are choosing photographers based on their own criteria, or are they deferring to their agency partners? Because, and let me tell you why I'm asking the question.
Yeah.
You know, it used to be that if we were bidding a job and we were told we were the recommend, pretty most of the time it would come back and we would be awarded the job. But more so in the last few years, if we are told we're the recommend, I'm almost like, oh my God, please don't tell me that. I don't want to hear that.
I want to get
Because
excited.
then we hear, oh my gosh, the client chose blah, blah, blah. So I have sensed a shift out there, but I'm not sure what you're sensing.
Oh man, I feel like that's really hard to say. I feel like there are some clients that tend to want to work with the same artists all the time. They just are too afraid to try someone new. They want to go with what they know. They don't want to take any risks. And so, even if we present, like there's a pool of photographers that we work with, on every project for this particular client. They don't really want to explore new options. Sometimes we'll add a few in there and kind of get their take on it, but they're just a little nervous. And, these tend to be bigger brands that don't really feel comfortable trying something new unless, there's a real interesting project or spot like Super Bowl, you know what I mean? Like something outside of the norm. So I think those clients are going to go with who they know. And they're also going to go with whoever is low out of the pool of people that they know, right?
Yeah.
And then there's other clients that are younger, that are newer, that are more willing to be, quote unquote, disruptive and want to look at interesting stuff and interesting talent. And, I had a client at the last agency who we threw kind of someone a little different into the mix that we thought was really fun and interesting. And they actually really liked this photographer and were willing to give it a try. So, I just feel like it's just a client. From my experience, it just varies from client to client.
I also think something that is happening out there is when we used to have to do triple bids, there was always one that was the recommend and two that were kind of throwaway bids, not throwaways, but like the team didn't really care about them too much and there wasn't as much effort put into it. I think now you guys are presenting three very valid, exciting, strong choices. And all three of them have worked really hard to like jam on it and get it, so I feel like whether you're the recommend or not, up until the very end, you have a chance.
I think so too. And a lot of times actually dates can shift and our recommend may not be available anymore. And then we'll have to say, hey, are you, is the second or third choice, are you still available? Because we need you now. So I definitely don't think throw in the towel until the very end. Things come up all the time. And like I said, a lot of times, not a lot of times, but a handful of times a new marketing person will be hired at the client, at the company, and they'll have a different viewpoint. And all of a sudden your reco is out the window.
Yeah. Oh, so interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's
don't give up until the very end.
Yeah, that is so true. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about marketing to you. How are photographers and getting in touch with you right now? I know it's hard, obviously, as reps, we can't come do portfolio shows. We're not in the same city, so we're not, seeing each other at events and things like that. But how are people showing you work?
I once in a while will do portfolio reviews with photographers or reps, and a lot of it is email for me, honestly, and Instagram. I am the type of person that is very type A and has to have a very clean and neat inbox. So I do actually go through like every one of my emails as they pop up. And if I do a quick scroll and something looks interesting, I'm going to I'm going to read it and I'm going to click on the website and I'm going to take a minute to see if this person is interesting. That said, there are a couple agencies and photographers that send me stuff every other day. And that's, when I see that when another email from them come through, I tend to overlook it or delete it. So, there's like a fine line between sending the right amount of marketing material versus too much.
Definitely.
But, it's definitely, I don't mind seeing new work from people, on every other weekly basis or something. I really don't. I like being interrupted in my email by cool creative things and not just my, emails from my account team telling me I'm over budget.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to figure out. I mean, I was doing a Zoom portfolio show the other day, and like 25 people showed up, which was great because, it's hard to get people to sign up for another Zoom.
Mm.
But it was funny to me because no one had their camera on. And I thought that was so interesting. People were engaged in the chat, but I thought, oh, like, it's just the Zoom thing is hard. It's just, it was like I was presenting to a blank screen. It was
Yeah,
interesting.
you're losing a little bit of that humanity and a little bit of that interaction. I agree.
Hmm.
It's a little tough. I've done a few one-on-one reviews, and I really like doing those. I feel like it's more intimate. I mean, it definitely is more intimate, and you have your camera on when it's one-on-one.
Yeah.
You kind of want to see the person, you want to get to know them. I feel like those are more valuable to me than kind of the big presentations, probably.
Yeah, I like those too. And they're hard to get. Those things we're reaching out
Yes.
occasionally on behalf of our photographers, and they're not the easiest to get. When you do, it's so rewarding. But I think, people are busy and everything's online and everything takes longer. So I think, I'll be happy when I can get back into the agencies.
I was just going to say that that's one thing I do hope comes back at some point is having those shows because it really is a nice interruption to the day, even for creatives who are swamped. They like to take a little break a lot of times
Mhm.
and see what's out there and see what's new. And I don't think they're doing it as much either. So I really do hope that comes back.
At the end of October and the beginning of November, Le Book will be hosting a Chicago and a New York event. So I'm hoping it stays, and because it'll be really great. I mean, even with masks on, like it'll be
Yes.
just really great to see people again. And the fact that we can't get into the agencies, maybe people will be looking to get out of their, dining rooms and off their screens
Their
and
bedrooms. Yeah.
come into the city to, to attend the event. So we'll see.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I would definitely be there.
Okay, good. Well, I think they're doing an LA one in the new year, so we can see
Great.
you there.
And COVID will be gone by then, so
And the COVID will be gone.
it'll be perfect.
Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh, I love that. Before we finish, we're kind of winding down here. I always ask the same couple of questions at the end. What's your favorite thing to do on a Sunday?
Yeah, Sunday, it's always kind of been, well, since we've had a daughter, a family day for us. We try to do something with our daughter, whether it be like a little hike or take her to the beach or the pool or something. Just spending kind of that quality time together. But then we also love putting her down for her big 3-hour nap, which I hope continues forever.
Oh my gosh, 3 hours. That's
Tell me
amazing.
it does.
I remember driving around with my husband just so the kids could fall asleep, and then we'd park in like the mall parking lot and go to sleep ourselves while they slept because
That's so funny.
it's the only thing we wanted was sleep.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, I mean that's actually a time where we it's like our only time where we kind of just sit out on our porch and read and
That's nice.
just have kind of that quiet time together. So that's a really fun thing to do.
And if you weren't a producer, what would you do? If you could do anything you wanted, what would it be?
There's still that little part of me that is really into photojournalism and just that more documentary style of photography. And I think maybe someday I'll work more on the editorial side, maybe do more photo editing or something like that. Cause I really do want to be involved, I think, in something that, can change people's minds about the world and can lead to change in the world. I think that's always kind of been a passion of mine. So,
That's
yeah,
amazing.
I don't know. I think, maybe some kind of production still, but maybe a little more globally minded.
That's
Yeah.
great. Oh, that's nice to stand for something.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, it has been so nice to talk to you, and I really appreciate that you took us up on our offer and did the podcast with us. And I want to congratulate you on your new job and wish you luck. And hopefully, we can see each other in person sometime soon.
Yeah, I sure hope so. And thank you so much for taking the time out to chat with me today. It was great.
Absolutely. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day and the week and the upcoming weekend of this short week. I love that.
Yes, the best.
Take care.
Thanks, Heather. You too.